I'm Ron Wilkey, your cybersecurity quarterback, project manager professional, senior project manager / program manager, all of that, and then some. I'm just messing with you. All right, check it out. Ron Wilkey, cybersecurity quarterback, and today we're going to talk about risk management. So let's get to it. I don't want to take all of your time today. I just want to get straight to it. Don't you just hate when people just talk, and never get to like what they're really trying to say, what you are looking at this video to learn? Don't you just hate that? I'm not going to do that. We're just going to get right to it. I'm just messing with you. All right. So let's talk about risk. What is a risk? Risk is the likelihood of loss to a business. Basically, that's what it is. Now, it can be financial loss. It can be reputation. It can be legal. For instance, if you do something, you have a risk and it actually comes to fruition, then what will happen is that you legally could be liable for that risk and how it affects your customers. So that's why I say legal ramifications. Also, your clients and customers may not have confidence in you. So that's reputation. So it's not always only financial loss, but 9 times out of 10, that's what most people care about, your financial loss. Isaka Square talks about it being a discipline for living with the possibility of a harmful event occurring. So basically, if something could happen and you accept that risk, is living with the risk, the discipline of knowing something could happen, a harmful event that could hurt your business. All right, so we're going to go over a couple of definitions, a couple of terms to help you understand. And what we will be doing is doing a real scenario, something that could happen, to make this a little bit more plain. And I want you to understand, these are not project risk. These are risk to the enterprise as it relates to being able to accomplish a goal or objective of the company. And usually that's financial in nature. All right, so what is a threat? A threat, anything that could cause harm to the business. The actual agent, anything that can cause harm. It can be a natural disaster, as I have here, like a tornado or a flood, an earthquake. It could be a hacker, human error. People make mistakes, so easily someone can make a mistake. Fire, methodologies. When I say methodologies, basically I'm talking about how you go about doing work, which could cause harm to the business. Maybe you need policies, have policies in place, or standards or guidelines that people should follow in order to do their job. So that could be a threat to the business. So let's talk about what a vulnerability is quickly. It's the weakness that could be exploited by the threat. So if you have weak walls on your buildings, the vulnerability are your walls. The threat is the flood or the tornado that could blow down your walls. All right. What's an asset? Now, this gets a lot of debate every time I do this talk, but basically it's a database, hardware, software, people, knowledge, reputation. Database has information, and that information may be worth some type of value to you or your clients or customers. So that's why we have database, and that kind of falls in lines with hardware or software. You may have a particular type of software that's very important to you, so you don't want it being used by another company, or if it's destroyed, then that's your way of making money or your link to your clients to pay you. So it could be software, it could be people, certain people who have the knowledge, your engineers, or maybe even your senior execs could possibly be very important to the company. Knowledge, so that's not quite like people. Yes, people have the knowledge, but you may have a trademark, or you may have a secret recipe that you may want to protect. So that's a very important asset. And also reputation is an asset. As soon as people lose reputation, they lose money. So you want to protect your reputation just like you protect anything else. Oh, exposure. Yeah, we definitely need to talk about this. It's the impact of an adverse event. So let's say that flood takes place. What's the impact to the actual business because of that flood? How has it changed the business? Are you making less money now? Do you have so many more repairs? Do you have to start a disaster recovery plan now? Or do you have a business continuity plan in place currently? How much does it cost to enact that? What if a hacker comes in and destroys all of your information? So now you have legal ramifications, and maybe you have to contact your clients and customers and talk to them about identity theft. So that's the exposure aspect of the risk mitigation and risk management process. And again, we will apply these very shortly in a real scenario. What are controls? Controls are measures that you put in place to protect your system. So I have here administrative, technical, and physical. An administrative control could be a policy that you put in place to let people know how they should behave on social media sites. Maybe some type of security awareness training that you put in place to show people how they should respond to certain types of emails that are phishing emails. A technical control would be something like a firewall that you put in place, or antivirus software. Physical measures could be something like a fence or a lock on a door, but they're things that are there, countermeasures, safeguards used to protect your systems and your way of doing business. Now, what are your residual risks? So let's say you've done a lot of different things to mitigate your risk. Here I have countermeasures, but you haven't produced a countermeasure or control for every single risk. Well, what's left over is your residual risk. So your total risk minus your countermeasures equal your residual risk. All right, so when you do your risk analysis, you basically want to always determine the value of your assets and what can cause them harm. And along those lines, you also want to prioritize your assets when you're doing your risk analysis. So once you determine the asset value, what can cause them harm, you can figure out whether or not you need to protect them. And that's your risk analysis. Your asset value, that's in money, dollars, euros, whatever country you're in. But it's measured in currency, your asset value. So if your database is worth $500,000 for you, then that's the asset's value. The exposure factor, that's the expected percentage of loss if a risk occurs. So if something were to occur, the threat takes advantage of the vulnerability, then whatever happens, that's the exposure factor. And this is in a percentage. All right, that's very important for you to know. The exposure factor is in a percentage. So now let's get to the single loss expectancy. This is why you watch the video. You want to determine how much you would lose if an event occurs. So that's what the single loss expectancy is, what you can expect to lose if a threat takes advantage of the vulnerability and the risk is realized. That formula is the asset value times the exposure factor. So you know what the asset value is. That's how much money the database costs. So we said that was $500,000. And we said the exposure factor is 20%. So let's say you have a database and it's in a data warehouse. And if you're determining that the scenario is a fire could occur because there's not a no smoking policy in the data warehouse. So you're expecting that because of that, there could be a fire someday, and 20% of the database could be harmed due to this fire. So you would determine that, and the easy math gives you $100,000. $500,000 times 20% will give you $100,000 loss. And that's what you can expect to occur if a fire occurred in that room, in the data warehouse, next to with the database on that server. All right. So how often do you think this will happen annually? That's your annual rate of occurrence. The probability of the loss occurring. How likely is this going to occur annually? And this has to be a positive number. You can't say this happens once every 20 years and so it's a negative 20. You can't do that. That's not how this works. So the way that works is you take the single loss expectancy and you multiply it times the annual rate of occurrence. So if you think this occurs one time a year, that number would be 100,000 times 1. If you think it happens 4 times a year, that number would be 100,000 times 4. But if you think this happens once every 4 years, then that number would be 100,000 times 1 over 4, or 0.25. In this example, we're saying that this fire could occur once every 2 years. And so that's 0.50. 1 divided by 2 is 0.50. So 100,000 times 0.50 equals 50,000. We're saying that's our single loss expectancy. So when you do your cost-benefit analysis, let's say the solution costs $300,000. This is how you plan on mitigating that fire. And what you've decided to do is you've decided to put in a specialized Halo or Halon 5 sprinkler system, which will put the fire out very quickly, and it's going to cost you $300,000. So if your annual loss expectancy is $50,000 in 6 years, you would have justified the cost. And that's basically your cost benefit analysis. So basically what we've just done are the steps for you doing your risk management. So your risk mitigation process is basically determining your risk assessment, the value to those assets, doing a risk response, which is basically determining what you can do to mitigate that risk. In this case, we said using a sprinkler system, that's $300,000. And what we haven't talked about yet is basically evaluation and monitoring. So you want to make sure that you don't just do this one time, but you go back and you look at it and you make sure this is actually happening once every 2 years. For instance, let's change that scenario and let's say it's a hacker. Instead of a hacker coming in once every 2 years, let's say you're still using XP, and XP no longer is supported by Microsoft. So now it's more vulnerable. So instead of something happening once every 2 years, it can happen twice a year. So that's basically measuring the risk and the threat of the landscape. And you want to continuously do that because, as I have here, things change. So how do you deal with risk? There are several ways you can deal with it. You can accept it. You can say, I'm not paying the $300,000 and just go forward with things as they are. You can reduce it. You can pay the $300,000 to reduce the amount of likelihood and probability that the fire could destroy the server with the database on it. You could transfer the risk. You could say, I'm just going to go and buy insurance. If we lose $500,000, that means I need to buy a $500,000 policy. And if something were to occur, I'll call my insurance agency. And from there, I'll use that money to contact our clients and customers, to do press reports, to enact our disaster recovery plan, and things of that nature. So that's only financial. It can't help your reputation necessarily directly. You can't transfer your reputation, but you can transfer the financial costs. And I'll actually talk more about transferring and insurance and how all of that works in another video. And the other thing you can do, last but not least, is you can actually avoid it. You can fix the problem of why fires occur in the first place. Maybe you put a no smoking policy in place. Maybe you actually change the wiring so that you have less probability of electrical fires. So there's some things that you can do to just take the risk out completely, and that's what avoiding the risk, that's what it actually is. Thank you for watching this video. I'm Ron Wilkey, your cybersecurity quarterback, and I hope you learned something and you can use it. Make sure you subscribe to this channel so you can get all of my videos and updates. Thanks.